So I am happy to welcome to the show the CEO of Decibel, Gregory Kris. So hi Gregory, and thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Hi Andrew.
First of all, when did Decibel start out and what is the idea behind the company?
Okay, well Decibel's been 4 years in development. The idea is to build a platform, a database of music metadata, factual data about music. At the moment, music metadata is very fractured across the industry. Information is in silos. You have collection agencies that have their own metadata. You have music distributors and labels that have their own metadata. And businesses that are online, the Spotify's, Pandora's, that either license in metadata from sources or they also have their own metadata. So our idea was to put together something that would be a definitive reference that would be able to power all of these businesses.
In a recent presentation at the Geek and Rolla conference, you talked about the lack of metadata holding back music sales. Can you explain what you mean by that and why you think metadata is so important in developing stronger sales?
Okay, let me give you an example because that's absolutely key to what we're doing. The better the metadata, the better the consumer experience and therefore the more sales. So it's a very simple equation. Let's say, for example, you're a classical music fan and you like Mozart. Well, when you put your CD into your computer or your iTunes, it comes up as artist Mozart. Now, for a classical fan, that's not good enough. Because Mozart's been dead for a certain amount of time. He's not in the recording studio. So composer Mozart, fine. But you have your sampler, your arranger, your conductor, your sopranos, your timpani players, your percussionists, etc. Say, for example, you're a fan of Jimi Hendrix is the example we like to come up with. Everybody's familiar with Hendrix. He was a session guitarist on Little Richard's tracks, for example. Now, not many people will know that. Some Jimi Hendrix fans will know that, but actually Decibel will tell the audiophile or the listener that that's the case. Therefore, you might want to purchase Little Richard's tracks because you like Jimi Hendrix playing guitar.
Sure, that makes sense. And music discovery is becoming a number one issue, especially for digital music services like V7 and Spotify, where the user can be gripped by the white box syndrome, which is basically when you know you have everything at your fingertip, but you can't think of anything that you want to listen to. So how do you think that Decibel could help in this department?
In the initial fact, Decibel provides every piece of data is a navigable piece of data. Yeah. When you read text, for example, it's text. It's very informative and fantastic. Gives a huge amount of context, but it's text. Data, by its very nature, is something that you can navigate through. So, for example, you may see that Prince was born in Philadelphia. You like the Philadelphia sound. You click on the word Philadelphia. It brings up all the artists who were born or recorded in Philadelphia. You're able to follow your own train of interest through the music that you're discovering. So using each fact to navigate and find things to listen to. Now, the idea obviously being that personal discovery is a far more important reason or to make a sale or to make a listening decision rather than personal recommendation.
And how do you gather the information that you include in the music? I mean, you talk about listing all the session musicians, all the backing vocalists and producers for a specific recording, but often this information is not even available to the record label itself. So do you have to carry out a lot of detective work on some of the recordings?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no replacement for manual work, of course. We get data in 3 different ways, actually. On the manual process, we get data in through crowdsourcing and people sat here in our offices entering data. Now, of course, even record sleeves themselves aren't always accurate. So they do have to listen to some of the music from time to time. However, that's really a QA process right there. So the manual part is a big part of what we do. The second way we get data in is through intelligent spidering techniques. So we have bots that go out and spider the internet and pull in relevant contextual data in order to fill in the database. And we also get our third and most important way of getting data is through data deals. Companies we either buy or take information from other companies that have music metadata databases. including distributors and labels, for example, and put that data into our database. Or they may in fact pay us to input their data and to clean it up for them. Not even the record companies know what they own. They are not always in control of what they own. They've grown by acquisition. So Island may have a particular set of metadata, and Def Jam may have another. Island, Def Jam may not know which way is up. It's unfair using them as an example. They're relatively well organized, but it just shows that by acquisition, you don't necessarily get the same data. So when we get the data from them, it's generally, let's say, semi-complete. There are always going to be gaps of information. You may not have Prince's birthday, you may not have Mozart's death day. So then the rest of this information, the gaps have to be filled in by our enthusiasts, editors, our Decibelian editors.
Is the information provided by Decibel for now only accessed by larger organizations, or is it accessible in any way through specific pieces of software, so that if you popped in a CD in the CD drive, these would then tell you all the fantastic information that you're gathering?
Well, we're purely business-to-business operation right now. So we license our data to businesses that rely on metadata to commercialize. So having said that, our information is only accessible to the end consumer through a third party, such as a potential client would be, Last.fm, Spotify, iTunes, or whoever may use our data. Having said that, we have developed applications to demonstrate the power of the data that we have. So we have a player, for example, that if you were to download it, would be able to let you navigate your own collection in the way that Decibel will allow you to do.
I imagine that your client base is split. On the one side, you have the content creators that want you to index their music, and on the other side, you have the service providers who want to access the content. In that respect, are those two forces equivalent, or are the service providers much more important in terms of your business model for the company?
Well, everybody relies on data. Obviously the content providers, the labels, the distributors, the people who actually provide us with data, want their data to be linked into the ecosystem. So for them, it's a huge incentive to be able to put their metadata in correctly into our database if we give them the opportunity to do so, or to at least provide us with their data in order to fill it into the database. For us, they are a valuable source of data and also a potential revenue stream. On the other side of things, the service providers who use our data are also potential clients. Of course, they're our clients. So therefore, they're able to use our data in order to commercialize. Now, we don't place a particular emphasis on one or the other. We're trying to provide a unified reference database for every service, every content provider, and every business that relies on metadata.
Is your goal to distribute everything via the cloud, or would you consider also tying your content to specific files, like some of the interactive formats that have been announced and introduced over the past few months?
Firstly, the fact that we're in the cloud is great for us. It means that our metadata is usable across service. So if Last.fm was Decibel enabled and Spotify was, the user would be able to transport their playlist from one to the other if everybody was cooperating in a very nice and friendly fashion. Yeah. It's also cross-device, so your metadata is on your Sonos home, and it's on your Blaupunkt car stereo, and it's on your phone, and it's on your PC. So cross-device and cross-service, that's what the cloud enables us to do, obviously. However, we are able to provide our metadata and embed it within the MP3 file. So that if you're the consumer and you download a Decibel-enabled MP3 file, you're able to access that metadata to browse and link that to the rest of the collection. So yes, there are different ways that you can actually use our data, and the data can be used embedded in firmware within your hardware, as well as actually within the file itself.
And in terms of metadata, most of the data you get when you insert a CD on iTunes still comes from Gracenote, for example. But do you see them as a competitor, or because they have such a large editorial part to their service? Do you think that the two services could work alongside, so you would provide the metadata and they could provide the edited content?
Well, I mean, firstly, the context they provide is great. The text, the editorial, the biographical information is fantastic. We do, however, see them as a competitor, and we hope they'll come to see us as a competitor as well. Having said that, we have a massive respect for what they do. We view them as, well, you know, we view Grace Note and AMG, Roe v. Muse, etc. We view them as the Henry Fords of our industry, right? The trailblazers. They've set the business model into process. They've done something fantastically well, and we respect them for that. Where they're Henry Ford, we're perhaps trying to be Enzo Ferrari. We're trying to offer a better product, deliver it in a better way, in order to service the clients and in order to service the end consumer and power the digital music industry in a more comprehensive way.
Labels nowadays work with proprietary and closed systems. They create their own product so that the resulting metadata is fragmented. And for example, I can safely assume that EMI can't access Warner's systems to look up the product details of something, especially when it comes to engineers or backing vocalists' information. Why do you think this fragmentation is in place? And do you think that Decibel might finally provide not only consumers, but also professionals with a way to streamline licensing, for example, or other processes within the music industry?
You should definitely do our PR for us. That's a fantastic question. You know, the labels themselves obviously don't communicate with regards to their metadata, but their business is making music. Our business is collecting metadata, so it's not their core business, and it takes a little while for businesses to understand the value that metadata can have on their sales. The better the metadata, the better the consumer experience, the more sales that happen, the better context, etc. So Decibel in itself is totally agnostic with regards where we get the data from and who we provide the data to. We're trying to do something that's, let's say, noble and important and vital to the infrastructure of digital music. If we happen to make money along the way, well, then that's fantastic for us. But that's exactly what we're aiming to do.
Decibel relies, as you mentioned before, on a strong community of contributors that in a kind of wiki-style fashion help with gathering some of the data that is used on the service. How is that community organized? How did you start it, and who manages it?
Well, you know, the fact that we're doing something, okay, it's a commercial enterprise, but the fact that we are doing something that's good and noble is a huge incentive for people to get involved. Whether you're a 16-year-old girl who's a fan of Miley Cyrus and the Jonas Brothers, or our founder Evan, who needs to know everything that Fats Waller and Dizzy Gillespie have ever played on or been involved with, people with a love of music love to share that love of music, and they love to be able to help people discover music. So we managed to speak to people, bloggers, thought leaders, businesses as well, who want to contribute to the overall ecology of the database, the ecosystem of the database, and provide specific information, whether they're subject matter experts on a particular century of classical music or fans of Robbie Williams. For us, every particular bit of information is valuable. So we're helping them with gathering the data and organizing it correctly, so that their knowledge is put in a database that's structured, that we're able then to provide and disseminate across whichever service uses the data.
So even though Decibel was started 4 years ago, it has found the potential to grow massively right now, because so many companies have found the value of the API, and they are trying to make sure that their services can interoperate with other services. So this is probably where your biggest strength lies, because as you mentioned before, you are in the cloud, so any service that wanted to integrate your data could do so fairly easily, because most engineers are actually building systems and thinking in that way.
Yeah, that was lucky for us more than anything, actually. The technology was built 4 years ago, and it's been constantly improved and improved and improved, and obviously we were reacting to the market, but we felt all along that that's the way the technology should work. So for us it's great. It means that the market's catching up with our technology. Does that mean we're visionary? No, I think we were just able to see what was happening and put our finger on the pulse and follow it. However, API is fantastic for companies that are online. So it's fantastic for the businesses that we all know, the Amazons.coms and the businesses, the recommendation on streaming companies and the mobile devices as well. But for things like hardware, it's very different. We can't provide that via API. Well, we need to provide that in different ways. It will be embedded in the firmware. It's a very different service offering. The data itself will then not be dynamic. If everything's API, it's always dynamic. Whereas if we're working with hardware providers, there's a more structured relationship and actually more structured license in place for that.
And finally, how are you looking to evolve Decibel in the coming months and years? And what are your projections as to what you want the company to achieve?
Okay, let's think big about this. We would like to become the reference for music metadata. That's the ambition of the founder, and that's the ambition of the team. Now, in terms of how we go about doing that, we're not futurists, but we are aware that if you have the data and you are then powering the industry and you have the knowledge, and therefore you have an immense amount of ability to develop and improve and develop applications that leverage that data. Sure. So by keeping ahead of doing one thing in a laser-guided way, which is collecting, organizing, and delivering music metadata, it gives us the scope, and that's the meat and drink of our industry, but it gives us the scope to then find new paradigms and find new ways of distributing that data. It's interesting to note that many of the uses of our database haven't yet been invented yet. The business models that would be using Decibel's data in 2 years' time are perhaps still in somebody's head at the moment. And so we're happy with the data that we have. It's going to be able to power the future.
Well, that's fantastic.